you.
That's a good start. I know they usually call this the graveyard shift, but however, I hope I won't put you asleep. I'm not anyway computer literate. I do what I can do, so I'm afraid I don't have any slides for you, but I'll tell my story. And I like to think of myself not as a survivor. I was at something one day and they said, you know, to survive it's kind of an existence. I consider myself a thriver. I'll be 72 in 2 years' time, so in 2 weeks' time. So I consider myself thriving, having had ovarian cancer. And my ovarian cancer journey began in 2003, which is over 16 years ago. On the 2nd of January 2003, my mother, who was 91 and lived life to the full, died with me within seconds. My life was turned upside down. I didn't know what hit me. I was an only child and I had been looking after her I'd been going home for 18 years, every weekend. I'm a presentation sister working in Clondalkin. And not alone was it a dreadful shock, but it left a huge void because Friday evening I automatically went to Tesco, got the messages, home, did the washing, did whatever, and back Sunday night and into school Monday morning. So I suppose the next few months were in a bit of a daze. I had no death cert because she died suddenly, so there was a post-mortem. There was a house to be disposed of, there were bills to be paid, and all of that kind of thing. So I was very, very, very tired, which would have been very, very normal and natural. However, April came and I got the death cert. So I said, that's great, we'll be closing school in May, I'll be able to get things done. Went over to a friend of mine, a solicitor, on the night of the 20th of May, and I remember it vividly, and we started the process of probate. Went into school the next morning, and teachers love holidays in the summer, the same as pupils, and somebody had up on the notice board, 7 more days, yippee. And I said, yeah, I'll be able to get jobs done. Now, I was a certain amount of trepidation, going looking for deeds and all that kind of stuff, but I felt at least I would have the time. That night, I loved sport. Celtic played Porto in the final of the UEFA Cup. It went to extra time, and Celtic were beaten 3-2. So I was going to bed, and it was late. I hadn't been sleeping very well, and I was a little bit restless, so at some stage I turned, and I got the most violent pain imaginable. I couldn't straighten. I couldn't turn back. I actually thought I had pulled something. So I hung on until morning, till I heard somebody moving. I was the second youngest in the house. At 55, they were up to 90-year-olds, so I didn't feel like calling somebody in the middle of the night. But eventually I called somebody, and we had a sister who was a nurse. She came up, she gave me a cup of tea and a hot water bottle. It didn't work. I don't know whether she felt something wasn't right, but she said, I'll try a doctor. We couldn't get a doctor, and then she said to me, will we go to A&E in Tala? And I said, I'll go anywhere, because I was in a bad way. But on my way up, I remember seeing the youngsters going into school, and I'm saying, I hope to God they find something wrong, because there was talk about people on trolleys and bed blockers and all of this. So be careful what you wish for. There was something wrong, but at the time I didn't know. So when I went up, I met a lovely triage nurse. It was a Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, so there weren't too many. So I was brought into a cubicle pretty quickly. Had blood tests, had an x-ray, and got a painkiller, and the pain went. I eventually had an ultrasound, and I was on a corridor, on a trolley, and I felt as safe as a house because there was a prisoner beside me, and there were 4 fine, strapping prison officers, and I said, well, do you know, I'm in good hands. I won't get away anyway. And eventually somebody came out and they said, the gynecologist wants to speak to you. So I went in. At this stage, a sister had come up to me, and he said, we have discovered a mass. Now, talk about being ignorant. I don't know whether he said where it was or what it was, but I just said to him, is that serious? And he said, well, if there is a bed, you're not going home. So I began to think, well, maybe this is a little bit serious. So I was admitted. By 6 o'clock that evening, I was up in a ward. No, I was starving at this stage because I had nothing since the night before. So I got into a ward with 5 other ladies, all of whom had hysterectomies and were at various stages of not being able to move around. And the main topic of conversation was, had the prunes worked? Or had the Normacol worked? Or had anything else worked? And here was I, walking around the ward with absolutely nothing, as I thought nothing wrong with me. And you always get one in a ward. She said to me, I had a cyst the size of a melon removed, but it was benign. Now, if they talk about keeping you here, you're okay. It's benign. If they mention James's, you're more or less finished because it's cancer. So anyway, I was there. That was Thursday. Friday, I had a scan. I didn't hear anything, and I was wondering why I wasn't being let home for the weekend, because I only lived down the road. I was only 10 minutes down the road. So I was there walking around for the weekend. We went down and had coffee in the coffee dock. My friends came in to see me. On Monday, I had an MRI. And every morning a team would go around and they would stand at the end of the bed and they'd talk. And on the Monday morning, there was an older lady and she said to me, who is your GP? And I said, I don't have a GP. And she said, well, it might be a good thing to get a GP. And I said, I will when I get out. And I also heard some kind of mention of James's. It was the first time I thought of cancer. Up to that, I thought it might be appendix, it could be a virus. The pain was long gone. So when I heard James's, I began to cry. And the nurse came in. She said, what are you crying for? And I told her. And she said, well, they were probably talking about another patient in the ward. But eventually they got Mr. Prendergast to come in and talk to me. And he said, it is ovarian cancer. Now again, I was very ignorant. I thought cancer was something like a bullet you got in various organs. I didn't know that there were different types of cancer. My father had died of bowel cancer at 74. And to me it was kind of a death sentence. Once you heard you had cancer, that was it. But he explained that they didn't do anything about it there and that I would be transferred into James's. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was brought in by taxi on the Thursday and I met Dr. Gleason. And she was a darling. Here was I in the dressing gown and the slippers. I was like something out of Coronation Street. I was a combination of Roycropper and Haley because, you know, and the man who drove me in the taxi, his daughter was in our school and I was saying, oh God, he'll go in and he'll say, you know, I had her in there. Anyway, she said, I will do the surgery on you and I will remove the uterus, fallopian tubes, the ovaries, the appendix and the omentum. I didn't know I had an omentum now, but I asked her what it was and she said it was some kind of a bubble wrap around to protect the organs. In fact, I felt she was going to take out everything that wasn't nailed down. But, however, I went back to James's after that and I said, I might as well go home and try and get a few things ready. I hadn't stuff with me because I had just gone in to A&E. So I went in on the Sunday of the bank holiday weekend in June. And on the Wednesday, the day the leaving cert began, Dr. Gleason debulked me. It's a word I didn't know at the time. And it was 2 weeks to the day after I had got the pain. So I know I have been privileged to have been so quick because going to patient days and going to things like this, I discovered that people were maybe months going from one doctor to another or going from one test to another and all the time the cancer was progressing. So I had the surgery and I got over the surgery quite well because, to be honest, I was actually quite fit going in. I really wasn't sick. And then a few days after that, another doctor came in. I was lucky I had a friend with me and she said to me, you've been diagnosed with clear cell stage 3C. Now, it would have been 2C if it weren't for the, I think it's acetes. Now, it could have been an algebra equation she was giving me. 2C equals 3A plus B. I didn't have a breeze. Neither did I ask. And I would consider myself a reasonably intelligent person, but I didn't ask. There could have been 26 stages. I didn't know whether it was good to be 3 or whether it was good to be 1. I didn't know where I stood. And I would have doubted myself, only my friend was with me. And she was as stupid as I was. She didn't ask any questions either. Now, I discovered sometime afterwards that I actually wasn't 3A. I discovered at a checkup in James's that I was actually 1C. But I came home and did the fatal thing. I looked up Dr. Google. And I thought, well, 1C, I had a little bit more knowledge at this stage. I said, maybe 1C is better than 3A. But when I looked up clear cell 1C, it said that the prognosis really wasn't any different to the prognosis for 3 something of a different type. So I decided that was the end of me and Dr. Google. So then I was told I would have 6 sessions of chemotherapy, and Dr. Kennedy came in, a darling of a man, and he said to me, you'll have 3 weeks of chemo, you'll have 3 weeks, you'll have chemo every 3 weeks for 6 sessions. And I said, great, I'll finish on the 16th of October, the day before my birthday. And he said, hold it, it doesn't always go like that. Your bloods might be down, or, you could get an infection, or you could get something. But thank God I didn't. So on the 3rd of July, I started chemo. He said, I want to start as soon as you're able for it, because he said, at the moment, you're clear of disease. So 6 weeks to the day I got the pain, I started the chemo. So I got the first chemo and came home, and I said, I don't know what people are talking about, this chemo thing, this is not bad. Mind you, by the time I got the second one, it was like being hit by a steamroller. The hair fell out. No, I never thought I was vain. I actually thought I was quite unworldly. But by God, when the hair fell out of my hands, I realised how vain I was. I went to get the wig before the hair fell out, and it was the lady in the hairdressers told me I might qualify for a medical card. Nobody had said anything to me about medical cards, and I actually did. And my friend was with me, and I suppose it's a tribute to the doctors. The lady in the hairdresser said, which of you needs the wig? My friend said, I certainly don't. So I got the wig. I hated it with a passion, an absolute passion. I couldn't cope with no hair. I wore a shower cap. Now, talk about being silly. A baldy head in a shower with a shower cap. And I got twaddle cap. So I had to then put on olive oil. As the chemo went on, the fingers, I was constantly dropping things. I got neuropathy at my feet. I was wearing slippers. I still have slippers I got as presents that year, because up to after Christmas time, everywhere I went, if it was somewhere that I didn't know the people too well, I wore the shoes and brought the slippers. If I knew them well, I wore the slippers. And the tiredness was something dreadful. I will never forget the tiredness. I would normally go up the stairs 2 at a time. I was using the lift. And on one occasion, I was getting out of the lift, and an older sister who taught me in school was getting in. And she looked at me and she said, Gemma, I never thought I'd see the day. And she broke down. And when she broke down, that nearly finished me, because I was very conscious I was one of the younger ones that they were depending on, and here was I, able to do precious little. Anyway, I got over the chemo. We finished on the 16th of October, and my first birthday, the following day, I was bald, no eyebrows, no eyelashes, and no birthday card from my mother. And I cried. But I got over it, and I started then going for checkups. I would start at everything, I was every 2 or 3 months, and then I got to every 6 months. And I was doing fine. Now, I'd learned at this stage that you did have such a thing as a CA125, And I had learned that maybe there were different forms of cancer. But I just went from one to one stage to the next. The hardest thing of all was to try and keep positive. Now, people will say a positive attitude is half the battle. That's very easy to say when you don't have cancer and you don't have this hanging over you and poor prognosis and all that kind of talk. I suppose I kept up. I used to walk. We have a lovely garden. I used to walk in the garden. I did puzzles. I loved my football. I loved my sport. And I remember being in James's in June, the time I was in hospital, and one of my friends, she brought in the blue and navy bunting for the Doves, and she got me my Doves jersey. And here was I, sitting in the bed on the Sunday, watching Dublin play Laois in the Leinster semi-final. And Laois beat Dublin by 16 points to 14. And because I remember those days, last Sunday, in Merrion Square and in the Mansion House with my beloved Doves in the 5 in a row means so much. You have to have something, even if it only was football. I wasn't able to pray, which may, as a sister, but I knew there were lots of people praying for me and sending me positive energy and all that kind of stuff. I got back to school and everything was going wonderfully until maybe November 2006. And one day, before I went back to school, I had used the toilet and I saw a tiny speck of blood on the toilet paper. Now, it was minuscule. And I said, well, I say anything about it. And it didn't happen again, but I was back from my checkup just before Christmas. And I happened to say it in James's. Now, I do not know. Somebody mentioned this morning, whispers from heaven. I often think it was my mother saying, maybe you need to take care of yourself. And they examined me and they said, there's nothing there, but maybe we'll send you for a colonoscopy. Christmas came and went and I didn't hear anything. And one day I was ringing a parent and I said, God, I must ring James's. So I rang James's and they said no, there wasn't any colonoscopy booked. So I rang Deborah, who's the liaison nurse. And she said, it's in your chart, but she said, no, nothing was done about it. I'll see what I can do. So I got a phone call to say that I would have a colonoscopy on a certain date. Now, the colonoscopy is fine, but any of you who've had one, the stuff you have to take beforehand is dynamite. It's absolutely dreadful stuff. And I don't know whether I was allergic to it or not, but I was vomiting. It was both ends. It was horrific. So I had the colonoscopy and I was semi-conscious, and the person doing it said, I'm removing a polyp and I'm putting a little tattoo in here so that if I ever have to go in again. That kind of sounded a little bit funny. And then, the piece de resistance, he said, you have worms. So, when I was coming home, I came home with a dewormer. Now, the only time I've ever seen them is for dogs, but anyway, I took it and I got rid of the worms. Following week, I had a phone call on Friday, and Delia, who's the nurse, said to me, will you come in on Monday? We want to do another scope. I said, do I have to take the drink? She said, no. But don't worry. When somebody says to you, don't worry, you kind of know you have reason to worry. So I went in and they did the other scope. And I think it was that Wednesday, I got a phone call to say, we want you to meet Mr. Megan on Friday. So my friend said to me, you're not going in on your own, I'm going with you. So in we went. Darling of a man, and he said, you have colon cancer. But you're very, very lucky. It's a different cancer. It has nothing to do with the first one. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yes, I've spoken to Dr. Gleason and Dr. Kennedy. We've looked at, I think, triple assessment, they call it. He said, it's a completely different, you're a very lucky person. Now, at that stage, I didn't feel I felt anything but lucky. Twice in less than 4 years. And I said, what happens now? Well, he said, I do the mammy thing. If you were my mother, he said, I would operate, I would take away what has to be taken away, and then we'll see. Now, I'd got my voice at this stage. I said, will I require treatment? He said, I won't know till I go in. Will I have a bag? I won't know that either. So it was arranged I would go in. he said as soon as there was a bed. So I got word to say that I would be going in about the 23rd of March. I would go in for a scan on the Monday, and then I would go in on the Wednesday, the operation on the Thursday. When I was to go in on the Monday, the machine broke down, so I didn't go in. Went in on Wednesday, was admitted and had the scan. Sitting up in the bed on the Thursday morning, no, I had been marked. They mark you in case you're going to have a bag. They marked both sides because they didn't know how much they'd have to take away. So I was sitting up, 6 o'clock, he said, I'll be up for you 7 o'clock in the morning. So I was waiting, and I was waiting. You know, when you're in your little Alice Blue gown, you don't look too attractive. I had rung everybody and I said, listen, I'm ready, I'm going down. With hindsight, must have been a little bit like somebody on death row. You know, I've had my last breakfast and I'm ready to go. So I waited, and I kind of vaguely remembered that the last time I had surgery, they came up beforehand and they gave me something, a kind of a remote preparation, a kind of a sedative, but nothing was coming. So eventually a doctor came in with her big file and she said to me, we have discovered 3 lesions on your liver. They weren't there in 2000 and whenever you had your last scan. So we want you to have an ultrasound. If I had had the scan on the Monday, I probably would have had a little bit of time to digest it, but there wasn't any. And I said to her, what does that mean? Well, she said, if they're okay, you'll be operating on this morning. And I said, well, if they're not? Well, she said the operation will be cancelled and we'll be looking at something very different. I don't think I realised at the time, but she was probably talking about maybe having liver cancer. Anyway, I went down and had the ultrasound, and while I was waiting to have it, Mr. Megan came in his scrubs and he said to me, I'm not worried about this. I think you'll be down to surgery very shortly. And to this day, I will thank him for doing it for me, because he gave me great reassurance. He didn't have to do it. He was a very busy man. So I went back up to the ward, and I was no length up there, and they said, come on, we're going down. And the nurse said to me, can you walk? We haven't time actually to wait for the trolley. So we walked halfway, we met the chap with the trolley, and I hopped on and down I went. Now they had said it would be about 3 hours, but actually it took 6, because it took him 3 hours, he told me, to unravel after my first surgery, because it was 3.5 years. So I came out, woke up and discovered I had a bag. I hated it with an absolute passion, and everything in me recoiled from it. I don't know what came over me. I cried day and night, except when I had visitors. And they were the lovely nurses, they were beautiful, but I just couldn't cope. So a friend of mine brought me in a CD player, and because I wasn't sleeping at night, and she had lovely CDs, but one of them I put on. It was Andrew Bocelli and Sarah Brightman, Time to Say Goodbye. And honestly, it was the first time I really felt, maybe it is, I just haven't the will to keep going on. But eventually, they'd say, come on, you'll change the bag today. And I said, we will do it tomorrow. You know, I was reminded of children in school who were reluctant learners, and they say, I'll do it next week, and I'll do it the next day. And that was very much me. Eventually, I got to be able to use it and sort myself out. Now, I was extremely lucky. I needed no chemo or no treatment after it. I was clear. So I began then going back for my checkups and my colonoscopies, and Dr. Kennedy kept me for 6 years going to him. I still attend Dr. Gleason 16 years after. Now, they asked me if I would like to finish off. And I said no. It kind of gives me confidence going back every year. So I'm like an old age pensioner going back to them now. I go back every June. I have a colonoscopy every 3 years. I have a mammogram every 2. I owe my life to the wonderful people in James's. You know, there's a lot of talk about HSE and all the faults and failings. I have attended the public clinic in James's for the past 16 years, and they have been absolutely wonderful to me. But I don't think maybe doctors realise the vulnerability of a patient. I know when I go back, my file is about that thick, it's a paper file. And when you go in, they'll always say, oh, and you had ovarian in 2003. And then you had colon in 2000. And I'd be saying, would you ever start with last week? And tell me how the blood test, the CA125s, were last week. You can go back then as far as you like. But, when you're going through all these pages and, Also, another thing, you're very vulnerable. I was in one day and the doctor asked me, did I mind if there was a student? I said, not at all. And it was I think a Belgian student doctor. And when she was finished examining me and all that, she said to me, I'm just going out to get Dr. Gleason. And I actually froze in the seat. Now, she could have been 2 minutes, she could have been 3 minutes gone. But I felt she was gone a half an hour. And when Dr. Gleason came in, she saw by the look of me, she said to me, are you all right? And I said to her, is there something wrong? She said, why? And I said, you're not usually called in, except if there's something wrong. All the doctor had to say was, listen, I'm calling her in to explain this is somebody who is learning. I'd be watching, have they a smile? A doctor one day said to me, are you on your own? And immediately I said, why? And she said, no, I was just going to hold the door open if there was somebody coming after you. Now, they're very small things, but to somebody who is quite vulnerable, they are very, very big. When I was diagnosed, there was no OvaCare. There was very, very little in support except what I got from the nurses in James's and the doctors. By the time I had gone the second time, I became aware of ARC. And I attended ARC for relaxation. I got 6 sessions of reflexology, and I also got 6 sessions of counselling, provided free by ARC. I also attended a 4-week course for those with colon cancer on diet and various things. Now, 3 months after my bag, I had a reversal. And the doctor said to me, it's less than an appendix, but he said it's the after effects can be difficult. And by God, they were. And not everybody experiences it, but I did. He said to me, coming home, he said, I just want you to know, it will be explosive and splattery. And that is exactly what it was. I had many an unfortunate accident, which leaves you kind of nervous going out. If you ate certain things, you just wouldn't make the ladies. But after 3 or 4 months, that settled down, and now I can eat everything. I'm back at work. Even though I'm officially retired, I work. I'm involved in lots of things. I try to do my 10,000 steps a day. I'm on no medication whatsoever. I take a calci-chew for my bones because I've fallen and broken both wrists, and I take a cod liver oil, both recommended by Dr. Gleason. There is life after ovarian cancer, and life is very good, and that's why I describe myself as a thriver rather than a survivor. One day I was in bed when I was feeling very, very low, and a record came on the radio. It was by Hot Chocolate. I'll put you together again. When you feel that you can't go on and life is, not worth living, drop me a line, and then I'll put you together again. And that's what James is, my extended family, my community, my friend, and my God did for me. Thank you so much.